I'm Andrew Schoenberg for KSQD. David Hahklotubbe is a gerontologist, death doula, and public speaker whose work includes advising and assisting people in the process of dying, along with their families, loved ones, and caregivers. He's an advocate for planning in advance for death rather than fearing and ignoring it. Based on regrets he's frequently heard expressed by people about to die, he's an advocate for doing what we truly desire while we can, so that we'll die with minimal regrets. This might include honest self-examination to find and pursue fulfilling work and nurturing personal relationships, and perhaps leaving those that aren't in harmony with what we truly desire. I'm about to interview David Hahklotubbe, and he's a death doula. What is a death doula?
Boy, nobody ever asks that question, just all the time.
Yeah. Well, then you'll have a good answer.
I have a great answer. And you know what's funny? It's different every time because I just get bored. Mm-hmm. So I have to mix it up a bit.
Okay, well, give us a really interesting one.
Yeah, I'll give you an interesting one. So a death doula is essentially a guide for people that are experiencing end of life. But it's not just for the individual, it's for the entire unit, the family system, even caregivers, people that are going to be facilitating that person that is going through the process. And most of what I do is actually not focused on the person that's passing. It's focused on the people that are supporting the person that's passing, mostly guiding them through the grieving process, but also all the different systems that people are unaware of that they need to navigate through, which could be complicated.
Give some examples of the systems.
Oh boy. So one of the things that I want to pinpoint that all the listeners should be aware of is to not wait until you're in crisis to make end-of-life decisions, such as an advance directive, which is your wishes should you become incapacitated to make a decision on your own. I want to underscore that. I couldn't say it loud enough. I've seen the ugliness of what happens when someone either does not fill out their advance directive and they don't leave some semblance of an idea of how they want their end of life to play out. Or worse, people will choose the wrong executor or executrix to perform what they've scripted as their end of life needs and wants. And they go off script. And I've seen where a person has very clearly stated that they don't want heroics at the end of life. They don't want to be on life support. They don't want anything to keep them artificially on the planet. And at the last minute, the executor or executrix decides to go against that and go with what they think. And then I watch the person suffer in pain at the very end, and it's unnecessary. So there's two warnings that I want to give. Number one, to first of all have advance directives. I know it's not the funnest thing to be thinking about. It's not easy to perform, but trust me when I say this as a seasoned death doula, it pays in the end. The second thing is to maybe not select a spouse or a blood relative to make these decisions because emotion gets in the way. And I've seen where even I was given the task to make the final decision for my aunt, who was incapacitated by a full CVA, which is a major stroke. She did not want to be kept alive, and it took me a day to actually decide to quote unquote pull the plug. So even I was affected by it. Mm-hmm. So I know what it's like to be facing, okay, there's dad in the bed. Maybe he'll come out of it. And then he suffers through the rest of his time on the planet.
Besides what you've already shared, what else do you do? You said you worked more with the family and the support people and so forth than you actually do with the person who's dying. But right. I think you do work with the person who's dying too.
Absolutely. Right? And oftentimes when I come in to the scene, that person is incapacitated. That might be nonverbal. They might not be conscious. Mm-hmm. So I'm basically there to let them know that I'm there. an extra person in the room, an escort, so to speak. I tend to see what I do for a living as walking them home. And so one of the things that is really a common mistake that families make is that when the person reaches a point of being non-responsive or comatose, they don't understand that hearing is the last thing to go. And even though their eyes are closed, they can hear you in most cases. And you just need to assume that they can. Mm-hmm. I've seen it where families gather around the person that's passing and they're saying things about that person as if they're not there, but they're still there. Mm-hmm. And one of the tips that I have, because they can't respond, is to respond on their behalf. And a lot of people will say, "Dad, I love you," which is great. And that person may or may not respond. I mean, you've got all these little wires and things hooked up. You can see pulse rates change when they say these things, or simply touching the hand. Mm-hmm. You will see a change in the pulse, or they may twitch or whatever. But my next level suggestion is say, "And I know you love me too," so that they aren't struggling with the fact that they can't respond. Oh. Yeah, just a small tip that I picked up along the way of 25 years of navigating through this. Mm-hmm. But to fully answer your question, if I come into the situation and they're still fully conscious mm-hmm. and they are able to speak, I will immediately go into my niche as a death doula is to mitigate end-of-life regret. So if there's any unfinished business, mm-hmm. I will do my best to fulfill that. So I have multitudes of stories of patients who, well, I didn't get to do this and I always wanted to do this. And so what can we do to make that happen? So it's like kind of a final wish thing. The patient
doesn't say that, you say that. What, right?
Well, no, so the patient will tell me, for instance, okay, so we're here. This is interesting that we're here in Carmel because I work all over the globe. I had a patient in Carmel who, and this might surprise people, especially those who are locals, she'd never gone to Hawaii. And that was one of the things that she really wanted to do. But of course, at this point in time, she couldn't go. Mm-hmm. It was physically impossible. And that's not to say that I haven't had people put on a plane to, in even a weakened condition, to fulfill that last need. But in this case, it was absolutely not possible. She had tremendous dizzy spells, nausea. A plane would have just made it a miserable experience. So we had to think out of the box. And I had a team of volunteers. I often do have interns from universities that come in and they can't do hands-on care, but they can do volunteer work. So I sent them with my Home Depot buckets down to Carmel Beach to gather up sand. We had put on her large screen TV looping video of Hawaiian shoreline. Mm-hmm. We had luau music playing in the background. We got a fan that had a heater attached to it that was oscillating, so it felt like there was this warm breeze coming across. So when they came back with the sand, I used cookie sheets and I put a sand on cookie sheets and put it in the oven to warm it up, which, by the way, experimentation's an awesome thing, but it doesn't always work out. So when I put the sand in the oven, there was this odor that happened. So maybe don't do what I did. The kelp that's in the sand heated up, and it smelled like low tide in the house. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But we warmed up the sand. The hospice team was there. They were giving her a sponge bath in the other room. I covered the entire bed with sand so that she got to pass away on beach sand.
Oh, wow.
Almost like she was in Hawaii. So mm-hmm. while I couldn't give her Hawaii, I did the next best thing. And her husband was just over the moon of the fact that we would do that. Of course, the DME provider who supplied the bed wasn't real thrilled that he got the bed back that was full of sand, but I felt it was worth it.
Okay, good. In case you just tuned in, you're listening to KSQD, Community Radio for all of the Monterey Bay, on 90.7, 89.7, and 89.5 FM, and streaming at ksqd.org. I'm Andrew Schoenberg, and my guest is David Hahklotubbe, a death doula who guides people in the process of dying along with their families, loved ones, and caregivers. He's an advocate for living now the life we truly desire, so we'll die with minimal regrets.
One of my patients named Jen, she was just an amazing person, and she was probably one of my most unique clients in so many different ways. One of the ways was that I wasn't really quick to take her on as a patient because I'm a gerontologist and I've only worked with elderly. And this person had known me through a variety of different channels, and I got a call from her husband, and I was kind of reluctant at first to take her on because she was younger than I am. And I didn't know how I was going to react to that. I didn't know how, when I'm consoling an adult child who's 70 or 80, and it's like, hey, mom had a good run. She's 100 years old. That's easy for me. When I have to face young children that are younger than my kids, that's a tough situation. Or when I have to engage with her parents because her parents are still alive. That's not normal for a gerontologist. Mm-hmm. The parents typically are gone by that point. Mm-hmm. So a lot of begging and negotiating took place, and I did agree to it pretty quickly. So I went to Stanford to meet with Jen. She was in Stanford Medical. And I said, okay, Jen, well, what is it that you want? And she had almost like a scroll. She said, I've researched you. I know what you do. Let's put aside all of the grief and this is what you can expect stuff. She's like, I've got that. I know that I'm exiting. Let's not waste time with that. Let's get to what I really want. And I'm like, awesome, let's do this. And she said, it's kind of hard to talk about even today. She said, I want to leave a trail of breadcrumbs for my family. And I said, what do you mean by that? She said, I want to be able to communicate with them from the other side and show them that I'm still here. I want to be there when they go to prom, when they get married, when they have their first child. I want to be able to speak to them from the other side. Let's figure out how to do that. So immediately I got excited. I've had over 1,000 patients, and not to say that they're vanilla or it's mundane, but there is a common thread that runs through. I can almost do it in my sleep. This was huge to me. It was like, wow, okay, somebody actually, number one, believes in the afterlife, and number two, has the will to speak once she's on the other side. She doesn't want to let them feel like she's completely gone. So we went through this process of trying to figure out how she was going to go about this. I spoke to mediums. I spoke to people that speak to the dead. It was really a process of how do I reach out to the right people that could get us into the realm of going through that veil. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I didn't really need to do any of that. It was about her strong will. Mm-hmm. Jen's energy was so incredible that she couldn't be contained on this side of the plane. And it would be stupid to think that they could contain her on the other side. Immediately after her passing, and this is not that uncommon, just to let people know, those paper towel holders that are motion censored, that you have to be close to, that spits out a paper towel, and they're in almost every hospital room, right? When she passed, the second after she passed, out comes the paper towel, and I'm like, ooh, she's already on it. And so she gave us that sign, I'm on the other side. The energy was transferred. So after her passing, she had wanted a week-long party. She didn't want a funeral. She didn't want because now they've changing a rose is a rose by any other name, right? We do a celebration of life. It's still a funeral, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. She didn't want any of that. She said, I want you to party in my name. And boy, did we ever, for an entire week. They're from Santa Barbara. So I drove down to Santa Barbara and I was there for a week. I barely survived it myself. It was chaos. It was crazy. It was great. But during that time that I was there were so many signs of Jen. She was almost showing off. And in one of my lectures that I give on this subject, I talk about the fact that she loved chocolate. And I'm not a chocolate guy, strangely enough. I mean, Andrew's looking at my build, and he's like, how is that possible?
I'm a chocolate guy, and I'm really thin. So there you go.
Maybe that's my mistake.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
We were bedside, and she'd gone in and out of coma She had a leptomeningeal cancer, which is of the brain. And there was a period of time where she was out for several days. And when she came to, which is, again, not uncommon, she had what we call the surge before the calm, which is oftentimes it's confused by the families and they think, oh, she's fine, she's going to get up and walk out. But no, it's that I believe what it is it's the veil is at its thinnest point before it accepts her and it welcomes her with that wonderful energy. And there's an absence of stress, of anxiety, and it's almost euphoric. It happens in pets too. Before they go, you get tricked into thinking, oh, they're recovered, and then a couple of days or even hours later, they're gone. So she was in that phase, and she was ravenously hungry, as you might imagine, because she had been out for several days. And so the family rushed out and got her favorite foods. And so on this hospital bed, you see this smorgasbord of candy, of chocolates in specific, popcorn and other things. And she was eating the chocolates, and her sister leaned into me and she said, just for context, David, Jen, on a scale from like 1 to 3, number 1 is family and her kids. Number 2 is chocolate. And I said, oh, wow. I can see that because she's just mowing down this chocolate. And after a few minutes of watching her eat the chocolate in somewhat euphoric sense, she leans back into me and says, maybe I've got that backwards. Maybe chocolate is number 1.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So there was that indelible connection with the chocolate. And I took away that, that's Jen's spirit animal, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So a couple of days later, after I came back home here, to Carmel, I had been dreaming, and I often have very lucid dreams after a very impactful passing. Mm-hmm. And I dreamt about her, and I dreamt about being on a stage, as I often am as a public speaker. And for some odd reason, the dream morphed into I was done with my talk, and the culinary team had forgotten to put out this big basket of cookies for the patrons, for my audience. And so I started hoarding the chocolate chip cookies, which is not something I would normally do, but I could smell the chocolate and it was intoxicating to me. So I thought, oh, okay. I woke up and I felt like, oh, that's odd because I'm still smelling chocolate. That must have been really a very powerful dream that I can still smell the chocolate. Oftentimes I wake up and you still feel like you're in a dream sometimes, and there was this scent of chocolate. And I didn't really pay much attention to it. Went about my day, and I had a friend come over a couple of hours later, and she walks by my bedroom and said, well, what went on here last night? And I said, what do you mean? She said, it smells like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory coming out of your bedroom. And I'm like, you can smell that? And she said, of course I can smell it. It's like almost overpowering. There's chocolate coming out of your room. And I thought, in that moment, my body tingled, and I realized, oh my God, that was Jen. So she was leaving a trail of breadcrumbs. She was saying, here I am. This is our connection. When you smell chocolate, that's me talking to you.
In case you just tuned in, you're listening to KSQD, community radio for all of the Monterey Bay, on 90.7, 89.7, and 89.5 FM, and streaming at ksqd.org. I'm Andrew Schoenberg, and my guest is David Hahklotubbe, a death doula, who guides people in the process of dying, along with their families, loved ones, and caregivers. He's an advocate for living now the life we truly desire, so we'll die with minimal regrets.
And so since that time, I'm constantly reaching out to the people that were around her, saying, what have you seen? What have you felt? And it's consistent. And in fact, just today, when I was on my way here to talk to you, I ran into a mutual friend of ours, and she expressed that she had lost her father, and she was excited to share with me the visit that she got just after he died. This is not, I guess, for the lay people, we don't necessarily all believe this, but let me tell you, it's just as normal as us sitting here today. This happens consistently. The folks that have passed on are on the other side of the veil, can and do reach out. My theory is that they'll only do it so many times before they give up on you. So if you're not open to it, if you say, they're not going to reach out to me, or I don't believe in that stuff, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because they will give you signs. If you ignore them, they'll stop. However, on the flip side of that, if you acknowledge them, if you accept that to be true, it is so clear, it is so consistent. I'm still getting signs from Jen that are just as strong as the day she passed.
Wow, that's so interesting. Yeah.
Similar to the visits that people will get after a death, and those who are looking for them will get them. And those who don't look for them oftentimes will get these almost outrageous signs that other people are seeing on their behalf. And they're scratching their head going, how do you not see this? But it's similar to the universe. If you believe in the universe, and I know some people are thinking, this guy's a nut, or he's a woo-woo, or whatever. And, I'm a gerontologist. I was hardcore science guy, analytical. It took a lot for me to convert into understanding that there is something other than things that we can tangibly explain and see and feel. And believe me, I was very hard-headed, so it took a lot. And that's, kind of the point of what I'm saying is, if you don't listen to the universe, if you aren't accepting the signs that they're trying to give you from the other side or wherever it is, they will continue to the point where they will put a roadblock in your way. Or they'll bonk you over the head like they had to do with me. Like, oh my God, man, how could you not see this? It's so obvious. And then finally, when you do accept it, it's almost like the wind is at your back. There are people that walk the earth that are almost lemming-like, and they don't understand why they're in the position that they're in, or, gosh, I hate my career. I hate the relationship I'm in. And there's these roadblocks, and they can't seem to push through them because they're not accepting that the messages from the universe. Once you do, the difference between being stuck staring at a brick wall and being on a bobsled going down a hill that's icy is just unbelievably different. So they're the people that listen to the universe, and their lives seem to be just like, oh, these things happen to these people all the time. What a coincidence. Nonsense. It's not coincidence. It's all scripted. It's all planned. The more you accept the universe, the more things will fall into your path. And when people hear the stories that I tell, a lot of them are skeptical. How can that be? Hang out with me just a little bit, and you'll see that these things are legit. And they happen to me all the time. And I say happen. I will them to happen. Some people call it manifesting. I just call it accepting, letting go and letting the universe guide me. And let me tell you, my life has dramatically changed since I've opened myself up to do that.
So when you say they give you signs, they are trying to contact you, etc., who do you mean by they?
That's a fantastic question, Andrew. I collectively refer to them as they because I don't know who they are. I just assume it's a collective. Some people refer to guardian angels. Some people refer to deity. Some people refer to energy. I believe that there is a collective, and I have no better term for it other than they. I don't think it's a he, she, or an it. I think it's a collective. And I do believe that some of it is driven by the souls that I had the pleasure to meet on this plane. Perhaps my parents, perhaps my grandparents, perhaps my ancestors. I don't spend a whole lot of time worrying about who they are. I just simply implicitly trust that what they're doing is in my best interest, and I follow it.
In case you just tuned in, you're listening to KSQD, community radio for all of the Monterey Bay, on 90.7, 89.7, and 89.5 FM, and streaming at ksqd.org. I'm Andrew Schoenberg, and my guest is David Hahklotubbe, a death doula who guides people in the process of dying, along with their families, loved ones, and caregivers. He's an advocate for living now the life we truly desire, so we'll die with minimal regrets. So, David, you've had over 1,000 patients. I'm wondering what you've learned. Is there some wisdom that you've gleaned? I'm sure there is. Volumes.
And where to even start with that? I was conscious from the day that I started becoming a death doula in this role. I knew that I was going to be given unique opportunities, wisdom from those who have gone before us. And boy, was I ever right. So I had thank God, I took the opportunity to document. As I'm doing what I do, I'm documenting the wisdom that these people are giving me, especially the folks that are verbal. And I emphasize that the folks that are nonverbal also have given me quite a bit of wisdom. So I've collected that. And now that I'm somewhat retired from running, I owned and operated care facilities for the elderly for 25 years. I've gotten out of operations. I've sold my facilities. And now I'm focused on taking all of the wisdom that I've collected and putting them into books. So I've got 3 books that I'm working on currently. I tour the globe and I speak about the wisdom that I've been given. And there are so many stories. But let me tell you right now that if I were to summarize what's the most important thing that I'm constantly told by these people that are departing the earth, and it's with a sense of urgency, they'll grab my hand and say, David, don't do what I did. It's the common thread that runs through it is that the common belief is that the worst thing you could experience at the end of life is physical pain. Let me tell you that that's not true. The worst thing, and I've seen it over and over and over again, the worst thing that you can experience at the end of life is the pain of regret. Most people leave this planet with regret. Most people, and I know that the people that are listening to me are going to have this uncomfortable aha moment because they know that they're heading down that path. It's the mentality of, I'm not mortal. Tomorrow is promised. I will be able to do this sometime in the future, and it never happens. So there's that regret of not fulfilling something like a bucket list. How many people have bucket lists, right? How many people die with a full bucket? I have a 0 bucket. I have, every time I have an impulse to do something, I do it now because tomorrow is not promised. There's also the secondary subtext to that. Instead of taking action in terms of doing something that they wanted to do for so many years, it's the lack of taking action to get out of something that they're suffering from. How many people, especially when I was serving the greatest generation, especially women, told me, well, you might hear from my kids that I adored Ralph and that we were high school sweethearts and we loved each other our entire lives. I couldn't stand the man. But I'm letting my kids believe that. I'm allowing them to have that fantasy that was the perfect fairy tale story, but it wasn't. She was miserable. Or how many times have I heard, and I heard it from my father, rest his soul, that he pretended to enjoy what he did for a living, but he absolutely hated it. And to make matters worse, for those of you who are listening, you don't like what you do for a living, I've got some other motivator to leave for you to think about. Being miserable at work not only destroys your quality of life, but there's evidence that it actually destroys your quantity of life, shortening your life. Because you're so miserable in doing what you do, it does internally affect you physically. So if you're miserable at work, I'm not asking people to go absolute chaos, anarchy as a coach. I had a client once that she was miserable with her job. I said, oh, well, we got to figure out how to get you out of that. And the next session, she says, I've got some news for you. And I said, what's that? She said, well, I quit my job. And I'm like, oh, God. You just jumped out without a parachute. And she's like, you know what? It's better than sitting in the chair that I was in, being miserable every day. So I'm not suggesting you jump without a parachute. I'm suggesting that you don't put off till tomorrow to figure out what your passion really is and go after it. I'm living proof of that. I was an industrial organizational psychologist working in the .com field, making a ton of money and miserable. Money was not the answer. I was miserable. And the universe intervened. My 2 grandmothers fell ill with dementia simultaneously. I was thrust into becoming a caregiver. I fell in love with caregiving. I left my 6-figure job and reset my career as a night supervisor at an assisted living for $7.75 an hour. But let me tell you, even though there was that dramatic difference in the extrinsic of what I was getting from work, extrinsic meaning the money, the intrinsic was so much more powerful and so much more valuable. At the .com, we had badges that we would swipe to get into the doors, and most people don't understand that that's actually the same thing as a time clock. You're the people in HR, because I was in HR, we knew when people were working, when they weren't, because they swiped their badge. They would pound their chest and go, "Oh, I'm elevated. I don't need a time clock." Y'all you were punching in, you didn't know it, and as you left, you were punching out, so we could track how many hours you were working. It was kind of a fun little trick. But my point is, I was so miserable at work. We would hand each other our badges, and we would hand this guy that came in early, we handed him our badges. He would swipe all of our badges in the morning. Then he would hand them off to the person that was leaving the latest and swipe them on the way out. If you're doing that, you're miserable. So I exited, and when I got into the healthcare field, it was a shock at the disparity between payroll, the amount that you make versus what you are doing to impact humanity is just grotesque. And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. Everybody knows that already. Teachers and healthcare workers are underpaid, considering what they deliver. But once I got into healthcare, I didn't want to leave. I would come in on my days off. That's when you know that you've hit that intrinsic vein, that you're in the right field. And I was in it for 25 straight years, and I loved every second of it. So if you're not experiencing what I just explained to you in terms of loving what you do, get out. Don't jump before you have the parachute on, but figure out what it is that you love and follow it. Because at the end of it all, you're talking to a guy who lives at the end of the road. I can tell you with a high level of certainty that if you stay in the position you're in right now, number one, your life will be miserable. And number two, it'll be shorter than you'd want it to be because it's affecting you physically. Get out while you can, and don't follow the other folks over the cliff and regret your career choice. Same goes with your relationships. Any relationship, your relationship with your home, your relationship with people, with your significant other. There is no time allocated to suffering. And time is your greatest asset, so don't fool with it. You're only here for a finite amount of time. Spend as much of your time as you can in bliss.
Excellent advice.
Thank you.
In case you just tuned in, you're listening to KSQD, community radio for all of the Monterey Bay, on 90.7, 89.7, and 89.5 FM, and streaming at ksqd.org. I'm Andrew Schoenberg, and my guest is David Hahklotubbe, a death doula who guides people in the process of dying, along with their families, loved ones, and caregivers. He's an advocate for living now the life we truly desire, so we'll die with minimal regrets. How do you work with the people that you help? Do people hire you to come and for a certain amount of hours, or are you funded through some social service organizations, or how does it work?
Great question. And fortunately, things are shifting. As the term death doula becomes more popular in the common vernacular, just even 5 years ago, when I would say I'm a death doula, most people would turn their head like a dog who's hearing a sound for the first time and go, "What is that?" Now, more and more, I get, "Oh, I know somebody who's doing that," or "Oh, I know somebody who wants to do that." It's become more and more popular. And with that comes recognition from governmental agencies. California does not have any sort of funding for death doulaship. Hospice is funded for the most part. There are nonprofit hospices. There are for-profit hospices. Both are reimbursed by federal funds. Death doulaship has not been recognized in California, so I am 100% private pay at the moment, which is something that I toil over. I do some pro bono work because everyone deserves to have a death doula. But at this point, it's mostly the wealthy that are able to afford it. There are states like New Jersey who are usually ahead of the curve on most things. They do actually have the funding for death doulas as a supplement to hospice, so that they are reimbursing, and so that death doulaship, I think, as New Jersey goes, most other states follow.
Really?
Absolutely. And so we will start to see coverage for death doulaship, I think, within my lifetime. Yeah.
So what's the difference between hospice and death doulaship?
Boy, did I ever set the trap for you on that one.
Well, I was going to ask you that anyway.
Oh, good. So, yeah, we are a partner with hospice, and this is a common misconception that we are competition for one another. Absolutely not. In fact, most of my referrals come from hospice. Hospice is fantastic. I can't say enough about it.
Well, like what is hospice?
Okay, yeah. So hospice is really more of a physiological. They're medical. Death doulas, I'm in the exception, so I don't want to confuse people. Death doulas are a non-medical model. I just happen to be a gerontologist, and a lot of my friends that are physicians are also death doulas. I would be remiss not to mention Aditi Sethi, who's out in Asheville, North Carolina, who's a physician. She's exceptional. She has an institute out there, and she's really just making huge waves right now. But it is a misconception that hospice is competition for us. Hospice will come in, they have nurses, they have social workers. They will do a lot of the physiological care for someone in the dying process. However, here's the pro and the con of being funded by the government. The government only allows so many hours. So hospice, the misconception of the families, and as an operator and owner of care homes, I would hear this constantly from the families of the dying. Well, we don't really need to pay for any more care because hospice is going to come in and do it for you. Okay, so if you look statistically at how often a hospice nurse visits a patient at home or in an institution, it's counted by single digits.
Oh.
Yeah, 1 or 2 visits a week. You'll see the chaplain maybe once in your whole entire visit. You'll see the social workers maybe a couple times a month. They're actually not as hands-on as one would like to believe. And hospice doesn't argue that. In fact, they look at us and go, thank God you're here, because you're filling in this gigantic crevasse between where our services begin and end and where your services begin and end. It's an adjunct, and we are a team. So what I do is more the social. I do have the clinical background, so I can tell people, okay, this is what to expect. I'm not going to call out Stanford, but I've had this problem with Stanford a few times, where a clinician will come in and say, okay, people, this is what to expect when your mom is passing. It's going to be peaceful. She's just going to close her eyes, and then her breathing will stop. Slowly, it'll peter out. They leave the room, and I go, okay, now here's the reality. That was very Pollyanna. That was very clean. This is likely what's going to happen. There's going to be a death rattle. There's going to be emesis that's coming out of the body. There's going to be mottling, which is the atrophying of muscles. It's not necessarily going to be pretty. It could be like what that person just said it was going to be, but you need to be prepared for the actual reality of what could happen. So there is a lot of gap between where one service ends and another service begins. And so I am very close with hospice. I would never suggest that I would be a substitute for hospice. And I would also suggest that if you have someone on hospice, that you seek out a death doula in concert too. And it's really about building a team.
And there are other local people that are death doulas?
Yes. Yeah. And it's interesting. There are concentrations in certain areas. This area, I can tell you, there are at least 5 different death doulas that I've come in contact with and crossed paths with on a normal basis.
Mm-hmm. When you say this area, you're saying like Monterey County, or including Santa Cruz? Because the radio station is in Santa Cruz, and the majority of listeners are probably in the Santa Cruz area. So up there.
Santa Cruz, Aptos, definitely. They're, how do I say this diplomatically? Usually in the more affluent areas. Mm-hmm. This is not a career for those of you who are thinking, ooh, I like what this guy's saying. I like what this guy's doing. I want to give you a dose of reality. This has always been a side hustle for me because it's not a lucrative enough career to sustain a quality of life in terms of your cost of living. This is and always will be my passion project. Being a death doula full time, consider you can only, well, you really should only have one patient at a time. Some death doulas they try to juggle multiple patients. You can't be everywhere at once. So it's one of those things that's very time consuming with one patient at a time.
In case you just tuned in, you're listening to KSQD, community radio for all of the Monterey Bay, on 90.7, 89.7, and 89.5 FM, and streaming at ksqd.org. I'm Andrew Schoenberg, and my guest is David Hahklotubbe, a death doula who guides people in the process of dying, along with their families, loved ones, and caregivers. He's an advocate for living now the life we truly desire, so we'll die with minimal regrets.
So typically, how long would you work with a patient and the patient's loved ones? I mean, is it like 3 days or 2 weeks or a month or 3 months or what is it?
So the way that I work it is I will be there for as long as you need me, for as long as you want me. The reality is by the time people figure out that this is what exists and they want me to come in, like I said, most of the time my patients are either comatose or close to it. So the record is 1 hour. I've walked in and the person was actively passing and I'm like, oh, this person's like literally just about to go. Mm-hmm. And they're like, really? Oh, they said that they've had another week. And I'm like, no, I can tell you right now, this person's about to go. Mm-hmm. And then there was one that I had for a full month that just hung on. And it was probably one of the most blissful experiences that I had because family from around the globe got to come and visit and say goodbye. Whereas oftentimes you see the person walk in the door and their loved one is already gone. Mm. So they had plenty of time. The one person I referenced, Jen, was about 3 weeks off and on. Mm-hmm. I wasn't there bedside the whole time. And that's something that, you know, as a death doula, you have to understand this is not only physically demanding, but emotionally demanding. It's not uncommon for me to come back to my home and sleep for 12 hours after a really intense, because you're up around the clock. So it's not something you can just phone in. And I also want to make a statement that I think is very important. While this doesn't happen very often, death doulas are certified. We go through a process that's voluntarily done. No one in the history of me being a death doula has ever asked to see my certificate. So people are savvy to that and they'll just walk around calling themselves death doulas without any real training. And I've been the second doula in more than one occasion where someone hires a doula that talks a good game and then really screws things up. There also are certificate programs online. I've taken upwards of 50 of them and
wow, 50 of them.
Well, more for research than anything else because I'm developing my own program. Mm-hmm. I've been a content contributor to what I think is the best one out there, which is the University of Vermont. The Dr. Lerner School of Medicine has a death doula certificate program, and that takes months. But there are some, this is what I was getting at, there are some that took me less than a day. They're online. There's coursework, and then you take the tests, and you can pass the tests without even taking the coursework. So there is a large spectrum. There are death doulas that have never taken class 1. There are self-proclaimed death doulas. There are people that are taking the cheap way out. Oh, I paid $300, and I took a class that took me a day, and I'm a death doula. And then at the far end, you need binoculars to see me, someone who's a clinician, someone who took an extensive program and that was immersive and had actual hours working with patients versus just online reading a bunch of things and watching videos. So it's a buyer beware market. I mean, the medical field is a buyer beware in general, but when it comes to death doulas, you really want to vet your death doula because you don't want someone who comes in, and I'll give you a solid example to keep it brief. I came into a hospital room once and There was incense burning. There was crystals on the bedside table, and the photographs of the family that were propped up were face down. And so the family's like, okay, I need you to be as diplomatic as possible, but we're exiting this doula and we want you to come in. And so I talked to the doula. I said, hi, I'm David, and I'm a death doula. And she said, well, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I think they're looking for just a different flavor of death doula. And so I'm going to be taking the case on from now. And so I started asking her questions. I said, so this patient, so they wanted incense, because that's very unusual. And also it's against hospital code. So I'm like, okay, that's odd. And I'm like, oh, they believe in crystals. And she's like, no, I do. And I'm like, red flag. And I said, okay, can I ask you why the photos are face down on the table of the family? Well, we believe that when the spirit leaves the body, if they see the photographs, the spirit will be confused and they'll be stuck in purgatory. And I'm like, what? So she made it about her beliefs and had it was not person-centered care whatsoever. It was, person-centered in one respect. It was all her. It was all her beliefs and all this weird stuff. And great if the patient believes that, but you are a servant leader here in the death doula role. You will do what the patient wants, period. This woman was doing what she wanted and espousing her beliefs upon this family, and they didn't believe in any of it. And so as she was leaving, I said, so just out of curiosity, where'd you get your certificate? And she stumbled on it. Well, and I'm like, so you're really not a death doula, are you? Just be honest. She's like, well, and I said, okay, don't find something else to do. This is not your calling. Or if you're going to do it, go back and take a legitimate course. But those people exist. I don't want to create fear. I want to create awareness. When you're looking for death doulas, you've got to vet them. And you've got to just understand, one of the key questions to ask, aside from where did you get your certificate, what is your background, is what is your approach? And if they say something other than to serve you, on to the next one.
So if people want to get in touch with you for your death doula services, or maybe to have you as a speaker, how do they do that?
Well, my last name is Hahklotubbe, and it's spelled Hahklotubbe, and that happens to be my website address. It's hahklotubbe.com. And my email address is just david@hahklotubbe.com. That website will send you to my speaking organization. Like I said, I speak about this around the globe. I do motivational speeches. I do keynote speeches. This year alone, 2026, I'm already booked for several large organizations and conferences to speak. It's not just on healthcare. I speak about finances. I'm going to be speaking at the Professional Fiduciary Association of California at their large symposium this year about what is driving the decisions of those who are departing, so that the fiduciaries understand the psyche and what's driving these decisions at the very tail end of life, so that they can plan appropriately.
We're doing this interview with the Carmel Foundation.
Correct.
And so you speak in, nonprofits like this one, right, about senior issues of elderly people.
Absolutely.
But it's still the same, how to get in touch with you. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, in the worst case scenario, like you said, because I don't expect people to remember how to spell my last name, you could reach out to, say, like the Carmel Foundation. They'll have my contact information. They can refer you to me. But you're right. I speak at the Carmel Foundation all the time. I do it, again, a lot of my work is pro bono. Some of the topics really hit and they'll be standing room only, and then other topics are too terrifying. One of the things that I kind of kept out of the conversation is I am a sexologist. I have a degree in sexology. So merging the sexology with the gerontology, you would think that would be an attractive conversation, especially for the elderly. They say, okay, look, I need to know, what's going on physiologically, psychologically, emotionally. Mm-hmm. That's the quickest way to clear a room. is to talk about.
Okay.
And I'm sure, if people are listening to this while they're driving, they're like, ugh, they get that jarring image of their grandparents having sex, right?
Yeah, right. Okay, well, thanks so much. This was really fascinating, and you're such a good speaker, and we'll have you again. I think actually we could probably do more of this.
I would love to do that. And just to leave you with something that will probably give your listeners and yourself some chills. My last name, again, Hahklotubbe, is Native American. I'm Choctaw. And you want to talk about the universe guiding. My last name translated from Choctaw into English is he who listens before the death. So I was clearly stamped with what my mission was to be on this planet. And I finally figured it out. It took me a minute, but I believe that we all have missions and we all need to find what they are. And I found mine, and I've been in bliss ever since. So keep that in mind as you're plugging away at whatever you do for a living, that there is a greater purpose. We all have a greater purpose. You may not know what it is quite yet, but keep your ears open. It'll hit you. I was blessed with it being obvious, but it took me until I was in my almost 30 years old before I realized this is what I wanted to do or needed to do.
Well, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to KSQD Santa Cruz, KSQT Prunedale, K-Squid, community radio for all of the Monterey Bay. I'm Andrew Schoenberg. Thanks very much for listening.